As Russia and its President Vladimir Putin attempt to convince the world that Ukraine is on the verge of falling, the reality is far different. Support for Ukraine is as strong as ever, as a host of new joint defense partnerships between Ukraine and its allies are springing up. No matter what Russia says or does, Putin has to face the fact that his war has created both a stronger Ukraine and a far more prepared Europe. And now, another country has come up with a way to hurt Russia. Norway has entered the fray, and it's unleashed a shocking plan for Ukraine that has left Putin stunned and has the potential to seriously bruise Russia. That plan is a new raft of financial aid, though not in the way that you might expect. On November 4th, RBC Ukraine reported that Norway is planning to allocate a staggering $7 billion of its budget to Ukraine and its defense needs in 2026. However, that money won't come in the form of donated weapons, as has so often been the case in the past. Instead, Norway and Ukraine are going to launch a joint defense production program on Ukrainian soil that will see Norway funding its ally so Ukraine can build the weapons it needs to fend off Putin's forces. If that sort of arrangement sounds somewhat familiar, it's because this is the Danish Model in action. Created in 2024 by Denmark and Ukraine, this model has created a sustainable way for Ukraine's allies to offer support without having to drain their own militaries, DSEI UK notes. The model is simple, and Norway has followed it to a T. A Ukrainian ally funds Ukraine's companies directly, allowing them to build weapons close to the front lines. That Ukraine-focused production means that there are no transportation delays or bureaucracy in the way of Ukraine getting the weapons it needs. Ukraine builds those weapons, then deploys them immediately. There are other benefits to the Danish model, as DSEI explains. In addition, it reduces the training burden attached to buying foreign equipment, as warfighters can use technology they are familiar with, the outlet notes. Plus, Ukraine receives sustainable sources of funding it can use to maintain capacities in whatever areas it requires. Norway hasn't just donated to Ukraine here. It's made itself a part of a wider plan to make Ukraine a powerful, Russia-defeating military force for years to come. All of this news comes from Ukraine's Minister of Defense, Danish Model, who took to Telegram to explain the basics of the plan Ukraine and Norway have concocted. Model has been on a working visit to Norway to meet his counterpart Tor Sandvik, and he had plenty to say about the meeting. Minister Sandvik confirmed further support for Ukraine and announced a decision to allocate $7 billion next year for defense needs. I am grateful to the government and the people of Norway for their significant contribution, providing F-16s and supporting Ukrainian aviation, and for participating in the PURL initiative and the Maritime Capabilities Coalition, Model wrote. But that's just the beginning. Model met with Sandvik because Ukraine had been invited to a meeting of European defense ministers as part of the Joint Expeditionary Force, or JEF. With that meeting concluded, Forces News wrote on November 5th, Ukraine has enhanced several of its ties to JEF nations. These nations provide specialized training to Ukraine's forces and work with Ukraine on a number of issues, ranging from defense to fixing the infrastructural problems that almost 4 years of war with Russia have caused inside Ukraine. The JEF, which is led by the UK, is a 10-nation-strong collective, and its scope goes beyond Ukraine. Forces News notes that the meeting that resulted in Norway's new plan also took in discussions on the security situation in Europe's high north and the Baltic Sea. This is more important than it may appear on the surface for Ukraine. The fact that it was invited to this meeting shows Ukraine that the rest of Europe considers the country to be far more than a nation that needs to be saved from Putin's marauding forces. Ukraine is a true ally, and it's one that the JEF and the rest of Europe believes will be a key cog in the makeup of Europe's collective military machine long after the war with Russia is over. Ukraine's meeting with the JEF is proof that the rest of Europe is planning for a future where Ukraine retains its sovereign status. And as the Kyiv Post reports, Ukraine has been granted enhanced partner status within the JEF, making it the first country outside of the alliance to receive that status. Think of it like this. JEF is a NATO-aligned organization, though is not part of NATO itself. However, all of the JEF's members, including the UK, Norway, Sweden, the Netherlands, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Iceland, are NATO members. Ukraine's being welcomed into this group's fold essentially means that it's taking part in discussions and plans that align with what NATO wants to achieve. It's almost NATO membership by proxy, and being an enhanced member of the JEF is huge for Ukraine. That brings us back to Norway's new plan. We've explained the basics already, but the plan is divided into two parts. Schmial explains. Following the meeting, a memorandum was signed on uniform quality standards for defense products manufactured or supplied within the framework of our agreements. We must provide the troops with exclusively high-quality weapons, Ukraine's defense minister said on Telegram. This is an important first step for Norway's new plan, Standardization of defense products creates reliability on the front lines. With all involved parties on the same page when it comes to how they build their weapons, Ukraine's forces don't have to worry about unexpected surprises, such as manufacturing defects or different specifications when they're defending their country against Russia. Schmial continues by explaining the second part of Norway's new plan, as he states, "Another important step is a memorandum between Ukrainian and Norwegian companies on the creation of a joint defense enterprise in Ukraine. This will strengthen our defense industrial potential." This is the Danish model we mentioned earlier, though the question has to be asked, what are Ukraine and Norway going to be making together? Sensor.net has some ideas. It is also reported on the new plan, and it says that meetings between Ukraine and Norway's top officials may offer some indication as to what Ukraine will spend Norway's $7 billion on creating. It says that Schmial's visit to Norway was preceded by Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky heading to the country in October to meet Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre. During that meeting, the pair discussed defense cooperation between Ukraine and Norway with a particular focus on two items: drones and missiles. That's a pretty big hint as to where Norway's $7 billion is going to be spent. Ukraine has spent 2025 crafting several new drones and missiles that pose a major threat to Russia. The Flamingo is one of those weapons, as this drone-missile hybrid can transport a 2,500-pound warhead up to 1,900 miles into Russian territory. The same company that built the Flamingo has also created Ukraine's new FP2 drone, which allows Ukraine to conduct strikes in the Russian deep rear inside Ukraine. Both weapons provide Ukraine with the firepower and flexibility to hit Russia hard behind the front lines, and an educated guess would tell us that Norway's money may help to boost the production of both. By the way, Ukraine is already showcasing just how lethal its FP2 drones can be. It's been igniting chaos behind the front lines with its new drone by taking out Russian bases and ammunition stockpiles. Check out our video if you want to learn more about this drone's capabilities. Prior to Zelensky's visit, Norway and Ukraine also signed the Brave Norway program. Though relatively small, as it's only a $20 million initiative, the program will provide support for startups that are building the next generation of drones that Ukraine could use against Russia. The program will also fund hackathons that are sure to benefit Ukraine's cyber fighters. Plus, it'll help both countries create research platforms to grease the wheel as ideas move from basic concepts into fully fledged prototypes and beyond. So Norway's $7 billion plan hasn't come out of nowhere. It's the culmination of around a month of Ukraine and Norway figuring out how they can best work together to limit the effectiveness of Russia's forces. Speaking of signing documents, both of the memoranda that Ukraine and Norway agreed on November 4th are already signed and sealed. There is no great debate that needs to occur in either country's parliament or any bureaucracy that can get in the way. The two countries are likely already working together on how to distribute the $7 billion Norway will be sending Ukraine's way in 2026, meaning Russia can't even hope for delays to prevent Norway's plan from coming to fruition. The plan is already in motion, and it's far too late for Putin to stop it. As if to rub salt in the gaping wound that it's just created for Russia, Norway isn't limiting itself to aiding Ukraine militarily. In a separate funding package, it's committed $150 million to gas purchases and other measures designed to enhance Ukraine's energy security. That's according to RBC Ukraine, which reported on this agreement on October 22nd. The outlet says that Norway will be providing these funds via the European Union or EU, and they come at just the right time as Ukraine gears up for another tough winter of fighting with Russia. Why will the winter be tough for Ukraine? Støre hinted at the answer in comments he made upon the signing of this humanitarian aid deal. Ukraine is facing another difficult winter, and the power supply in the country is unstable, Norway's Prime Minister said. Together with the EU, Norway is stepping up efforts to ensure that Ukrainian households, businesses, and institutions have access to energy. These efforts are important for both individual Ukrainians and for keeping the wheels of the country turning. It's the part about Ukraine's energy supply being unstable that deserves the most attention from these comments. Putin has made it Russia's mission to devastate Ukraine's energy infrastructure this winter. In truth, Russia has targeted Ukraine's energy infrastructure every year since it invaded, which makes sense from a purely damage-based perspective. Temperatures in Ukraine can dip as low as 23 degrees Fahrenheit according to the International Rescue Committee. That's well below freezing, and Putin takes advantage of that fact by destroying the Ukrainian infrastructure that allows the country's civilians to keep their homes heated during the coldest months of the year. This is tactical terrorism, designed to sap the morale of the average Ukrainian and, if Putin has his way, perhaps even kill those who are especially vulnerable to the cold. To bring his strategy to fruition, Putin has conducted regular aerial strikes against Ukraine. The most recent of these came on November 2nd, which is when Euronews reported on a Russian drone and missile strike that killed 2 Ukrainians directly and caused damage to both residential buildings and civilian infrastructure. This strike was relatively small compared to others that Russia has launched in the past, though it still included 79 drones and a pair of Iskander-M ballistic missiles. Even so, the attacks left 60,000 people without power in Zaporizhia alone, Euronews says, in addition to causing several injuries beyond the deaths we've already mentioned. This is what Ukraine will have to deal with all winter, and future Russian attacks on the country's energy infrastructure will likely involve far more drones and missiles. Norway knows that Ukraine's energy security is at risk. Both the United Nations and the International Energy Agency, or IEA, have said so in separate October reports. The former says that 2025 has seen a 30% overall increase in civilian deaths as a result of Russia's aerial strikes compared to 2024, which indicates that these strikes are getting heavier and more numerous. Russia's attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure could also trigger a crisis within a crisis, leading to more civilian deaths, the United Nations adds. The IEA's view on Ukraine's potential winter 2025 future is equally glum. It published an analysis on October 22nd in which it said that Ukraine has to take a number of measures to defend its energy infrastructure this winter if it wants to avoid serious challenges. IEA recommendations include enhancing defenses around infrastructure, which may be a distinct possibility as Ukraine received more Patriot air defense systems from Germany at the beginning of November. Ukraine also needs to improve its equipment supply chains to speed up repairs, the IEA says, along with decentralizing some of its energy infrastructure. It's these latter two measures that Norway's $150 million in aid will partially cover. So Putin is now facing a situation where Norway has reinforced its support of Ukraine militarily, as well as doing its part to improve Ukraine's energy situation during the winter. Russia will keep battering Ukraine's energy, of course, but more help like this will minimize the impact of a strategy upon which Russia is relying to do as much damage as possible to Ukraine over the next few months. Norway's new plan is also part of a wider effort to draw Ukraine deeper into the European security paradigm, and it highlights how the country is now building direct defense ties with its partners rather than merely relying on them for aid. Russia's nose is already bleeding thanks to the jabs that Norway has just delivered, but a follow-up cross might also lie in Russia's future. In addition to everything that Norway has announced over the last couple of weeks, calls are mounting for the country to dip into its enormous sovereign wealth fund to help Ukraine deal with its perilous financial situation. Ukraine's economy is struggling after almost 4 years of war with Russia. European Newsroom reports that an unnamed, though centrally placed, EU official believes that Ukraine could run out of money to fund itself and its defense against Russia as early as the first quarter of 2026. There are ideas to remedy this situation circulating. The EU is considering giving Ukraine a loan against the $160 billion of frozen Russian assets its member states are holding. However, the idea is being held up by red tape and is still under debate. That's where Norway could come into play. Euractiv reports that Norway is a surprisingly wealthy country, so wealthy in fact that it maintains a massive $2 trillion sovereign wealth fund. Yeah, you heard that right, trillion, not billion. And there are several prominent voices inside Norway that are saying it's about time for the country to step up and use those funds to help Ukraine by underpinning the loan the EU is considering making to Ukraine via Russia's frozen assets. According to Euractiv, 5 of Norway's political parties, including 3 that are going to back the current Prime Minister's next government, are saying that Norway should step up and use its huge wealth fund to support Ukraine. Story seems to be listening. He has reportedly ordered a full internal review into how Norway could use its sovereign wealth fund to support Ukraine and ensure the EU's loan idea gets off the ground. Still, there is no agreement in place. Norway has the funds, many times over, to help with the frozen asset loan situation. There also appears to be a groundswell of support for the idea in Norway itself. But for now, all that Ukraine and Russia can do is wait. If Norway does decide to bankroll the EU's loans, then Ukraine's situation gets suddenly a whole lot rosier. Its financial problems, at least in the near future, would be solved at a time when Putin is counting on Ukraine's resistance to crumble due to its struggling economy. Norway has a chance to deliver a knockout blow to Putin here. Ukraine will be hoping that it's already winding up to strike. We also have to consider what all of this support from Norway, both confirmed and potential, means for Russia. We've already discussed the enhanced cooperation between Ukraine and its allies. For Putin, that cooperation is the exact opposite of what he wants to see happening in Europe. Part of Putin's plan when launching the war was to sow seeds of division among European powers that have the might to stop him. As Bloomberg put it in October 2024, from Belarus in the north through Ukraine and Moldova to Georgia in the south, Russia is waging a relentless battle to weaken US and European influence. For the Kremlin, it's all one fight to restore control along Russia's western periphery, effectively creating a buffer with the West and a new division of Europe. European countries getting their acts together and building defense ties with Ukraine isn't part of a plan that is quickly falling apart for Russia's president. Perhaps as worrying for Putin is that Norway has just shown him that his usual intimidation tactics aren't working on the Norwegians. Putin has made a career out of using Russia's military and economic might to create influence, but all he has really achieved in Norway is to reinforce the idea that it needs to prepare for a future fight with Russia while helping the one country that is currently holding Putin back in any way that it can. Beyond the new aid agreements that we've already covered, Norway is restoring and building new bomb shelters in its own territory in preparation for a possible fight with Russia. That's according to Politico, which said in January that Norway is starting to build shelters for any new apartment complex that is larger than 1,000 square meters, or about 10,760 square feet. These new shelters will join others that Norway used to build as part of apartment complexes up until 1998 when it stopped. What we see here is Norway sending a message to Russia that it's ready to call Putin's bluff when it comes to threats. Speaking of threats, it was only a couple of months ago that Russia delivered another to Norway. In August, the Moscow Times said that Russia was threatening to ban Norwegian fishing ships from its waters in retaliation for EU sanctions against Russian fishing. Perhaps Putin thinks this is a way for Russia to exercise control over the Baltic Sea. More likely, this was an attempt by Putin to tell a country with a $2 trillion sovereign wealth fund that he will hurt it financially if it doesn't do what he wants. The threat clearly hasn't worked. Norway hasn't withdrawn its support for EU sanctions. Instead, it's doubled down on its support for Ukraine by delivering a comprehensive plan that could make Ukraine more dangerous to Russia than ever before. And if the calls for the unleashing of Norway's $2 trillion are answered, Putin may soon discover that his threats have done nothing more than awaken a sleeping economic giant. The enhanced cooperation between Norway and Ukraine hints at a wider problem that Putin doesn't want to admit to Russia having. The reality for Russia is that it has already lost the Ukraine war, even if it manages to defeat Ukraine itself. Why? We explain all with the help of a NATO admiral's comments in our video. Check out that video next, and remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more coverage of Ukraine's latest defense agreements with its European partners. And thank you for watching.